Tagore Premanande ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Nama Om Vishnu Pada Krishna Vishnu Bhakti Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Prachadi Nirvisesa Sunyavadi Paskatya Dasitarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasili Gaura Bhakti Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Gaura Premanandi Hari Bol. So yesterday we learned the difference between sacrifice and penance. Bhakta Michael, you know the difference?
Sacrifice is giving up a lot of stuff, honoring and austerity, and penance is something which you wish, something which you continue to have, adding more austerity.
Wrong guess. But first one is right.
Okay.
Sacrifice, you're giving up something for the pleasure of Krishna. You're sacrificing something that you have. Yeah.
Is one willingly and one not willingly?
No.
Haribol.
No, not really. Oh, yeah, one is willingly sacrificed. And penance, well, in a sense you could say it's unwilling, but yeah, you could say that. Any ideas about penance? Okay, sacrifice is a voluntary thing that you want to do to please the Lord, right? Penance is somewhat involuntary. Forced to do it. When you make a mistake or engage in sinful activity, you can atone for it by accepting penance. Right? So you go to confession in the Catholic Church, right? And you say, you're on one side of that box and the priest is on the other side, and there's some kind of screen in between you. And you say, Father, meaning the priest, I have sinned. You say, what did you do? I accidentally killed my wife. Was it really an accident? Well, Father, I cannot tell a lie. I cannot tell a lie. I did it on purpose. He said, why did you do it? She got me upset. Okay, well, you have to go voluntarily to the police station and report it. And then you have to do 10,000 Hail Marys, Mother of Christ. So, penance is something that you do in order to nullify a sinful reaction that you perform.
Is it always like that?
Yes, that's what
Because
penance
like
is.
Hiranyakasipu, he is also doing tapa, penance, to achieve that boon from Brahma. That was a penance.
No, it wasn't penance. It was an austerity.
Okay.
It was austerity. But on the other hand, the example of penance would be Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he was a little kid, only 5 years old.
Mango.
He ate a mango, right? His father said, "You took some boga from the deity. This is a great offense." And the boy said, "Okay, Father, I understand. I promise I'll never eat mango again." That's penance, right? The rest of his life, the rest of his whole life, he never ate a mango. Many times he was offered a mango, he said, "No, I'm a sinner. I cannot eat mango." So that's penance. Where sacrifice is Bali Maharaj, right? He voluntarily gave up everything to Lord Vamanadev, Lord Krishna. So that's a sacrifice, giving up material possessions that you own to the Lord for the Lord's pleasure. And it's a voluntary thing. Right? Whereas penance is somewhat forced. Of course, you have to accept to do the penance, right? You're not forced to do it. That's why I said somewhat forced, but it's not completely forced.
What's the difference between atonement and penance?
Okay. Well, I don't know if there's a real difference between the two, right? But you atone for a sin
Because penance always involves physical.
what Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur did was true penance. The rest of his life he didn't eat a mango. Atonement is temporary, doing something to, in other words, the desire to eat boga ended once and for all for him, right? Whereas atonement is you undergo a temporary, let's say, dispensation for the sinful activity, but it doesn't end the desire to sin. So you could find that difference. I mean, real penance, like Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and atonement, where a person goes, Hail Mary, Mother of Christ, blah, blah, blah. And then when he walks out of the what do you call it, the confession booth, goes right back and does it. He can go right back, and usually they do it. They go right back and do it again.
That's what Parikshit Maharaj asked Sukadeva Goswami, beginning of 6th canto.
Yes.
Which leads to the story of Agami.
Exactly, right. So there are understanding these differences between these words, like most people mix the words up. When you understand the difference between the words, then you really know English language, and you use the words correctly, you know. So yesterday we discussed the difference between sacrifice and penance. And then now we just understood the difference between real penance and simple atonement, or prayaschita. Sacrifice is an act of surrendering a possession as an offering to God. In general, if you look in the dictionary, sacrifice, the original meaning of it is sacrificing an animal for the pleasure of God. But that's not the sense in which we use the word. And that's unfortunately in the Judeo-Christian, Abrahamic religious tradition, they were offering, it seems that they thought God accepts animal sacrifices. Now, he did before Kali Yuga, by the way. He even accepted human sacrifices. But the Brahmins performed animal and human sacrifices because they had the power to bring back the animal and the human being to life again.
Human sacrifice for Vishnu.
Yeah. It was. You have the example of Harishchandra. To save his son from being sacrificed, he purchased the son of a poor Brahmana and put him in place of his son to sacrifice him.
But that was for Vishnu.
Well, it was a sacrifice. All sacrifices are ultimately for Vishnu.
Right.
And Vishwamrita Muni became very upset when he heard about this. And also to upstage Vasistha Muni, who is the guru of Harishchandra, he goes and says, he teaches the boy a mantra by which, once he's put in a fire, he will not be burned to death and die. And then they put him in the fire, they kill him, and the boy says the mantra and he's saved from burning. So then, after that, the question is, whose son is he? Is he the son of the Brahmin, the poor Brahmin who sold him to Harishchandra? Is he the son of Harishchandra who purchased the boy?
Or one who saved him.
Or the one who saved him from death? So they gave the boy to Vishwamrita Muni because he saved him from death. He was the real father. It's a very interesting story. Yeah. So in previous times, the sages who performed these sacrifices, even human sacrifices, they were able to rejuvenate the animal or the human being into a young calf or a young boy. Therefore, they were permitted to perform these type of sacrifices. What happened is when Kali Yuga began, In the West, the Jews continued the animal sacrifice. And in the East, the Hindus also continued the animal sacrifices. But now they were not able to bring the animal back to life. And also the Mayan Indians also continued the human sacrifices, right? But they were not qualified to say the mantras correctly and bring the human being. And don't forget, Abraham was asked by God to sacrifice his son Isaac. You see, so these things were happening. But in the story of Isaac and Abraham, right before he's going to kill his son, God sends an angel and saves the boy. You see. So there's very interesting stories, if you understand it. When Kali Yuga began, you're not allowed to perform horse sacrifices anymore, you're not allowed to sacrifice any animals, and you're not allowed to sacrifice any human beings, because people are not qualified. But yet they continued to do it. Now the question is, why did they continue to do it?
Was it still after beginning of Kali Yuga, that Abrahamic,
I think it was around the time.
Around that time.
Yeah, around that
because
time.
their origin of timelines are messed up. I don't
Yeah.
think they have a good idea of what they're actually.
Judaism is, Prabhupada says, biblical history goes back 3,500 years.
3,500 years.
So 2,000 plus 15, so about, after Kali Yuga, but rather in the beginning of Kali Yuga, So they continued the sacrifices because they would make money from it. If you read why they were doing animal sacrifices in the temple of David, they had money changers right in the synagogue, and people were coming from different countries to perform the animal sacrifice and bringing animals. So in order to buy and sell, they had money changers right in the church. So when Jesus goes in and sees what they're doing, animal sacrifice in the synagogue, and the money changers right in the church, he overthrew the tables of the money changers, and he stopped this. He claimed that they have to stop. And then after that, he performs the final dinner, the pastoral dinner, on Ash Wednesday? Anyways, it's right before he gets crucified.
Last Supper.
The Last Supper, yeah. It's called pastoral dinner. And he says, I am the last lamb of sacrifice. Here, take my blood in the form of this wine. It was probably grape juice, wasn't it? And then he said, here, take my flesh in the form of this bread. And be thou satisfied. So that was on the festival of Passover of the Jews. The festival of Passover was when the Jews were in captivity in Egypt. Moses was like an intermediary between God and the Jews, and he received the knowledge that he was going to, in order to free the Jews, he performed 10 scourges, or 10 curses on the Egyptians. And one of them was he was going to kill the firstborn child of every Egyptian family, so that the angel that was going to kill them didn't make a mistake. God said that in order to pass over the houses of the Jews, they should make some mark on their door. And so when the night came when all those kids were going to be killed, the Jews made this mark. I think it was a mark. So then whoever came to kill those kids, they passed over the houses of the Jews and just killed the firstborn of the Egyptians. Eventually, because of the 10 catastrophes, the Egyptians let the Jews leave Egypt and leave their slavehood and go to the promised land, which is in Israel. But they had to go through the Sinai desert. But he kept them in the Sinai desert 40 years. The reason for that was he didn't want the generation that grew up under the culture of the Egyptians to enter into the new land. He wanted them all to die off walking around the Sinai desert for 40 years. So that only the new generation who was not trained in Egyptian idolatry enter into the new land. You know any of this stuff? This is all interesting stuff. You read the Bible. Anyway, the Jews continued animal sacrifice in Kali Yuga, and therefore Jesus stopped it. But they didn't stop in the time of Jesus. After they crucified him, 70 years later, the Iranians came and decimated Israel and took all the Jews out of Israel, destroyed their temple, their major temple, where there were all these animal sacrifices. And then from that day on, they stopped the animal sacrifices. They still continued them. I used to go to this one neighborhood in Paris, and there was a little shop, and there was a rabbi in there, and people would bring their chickens. This is right in the center of Paris, right? It's a big city, right? And people would bring their chickens and other animals in there, and the rabbi would kill them. So it's kosher meat. Nonsense. They still continued them. That's why they're suffering so much. Anyway, they stopped performing the sacrifices in the synagogues. They perform them outside of the synagogues. They don't do it in the synagogues anymore. And they won't continue them until they get their temple back. But they can't get their temple back because where that temple was located became the second most holy place in Islam.
Yeah.
They built a huge mosque there.
Because the Prophet had ascended to the heaven from that place.
Muhammad ascended to heaven and met the angel Gabriel, and he didn't see God, but he heard God, right? And then he came back again. So that's why there's always fighting going on around that mosque today. The only thing left from that original temple, they claim, is this wall. It's called the Wailing Wall. So the Jews go there and they cry, we want our temple back. You say. So you can't really understand what's happening in modern times without understanding history, because it's all a continuation of the nonsense history. Okay, so these animal sacrifices. So the word sacrifice in English is the first meaning is animal sacrifices to propitiate God, but actually it's nonsense, right? But real sacrifice is when you give up something that you're attached to for the pleasure of Krishna, to offer to God, So yesterday we discussed that the easiest process for understanding the subject matter of the self and its relationship to Krishna is to accept the statements of the Bhagavad Gita, spoken by the greatest authority, Lord Krishna. And then we discussed Confucianism, which could also be called Confucianism. Actually, Confucianism is not really a religion. It's a moral code for living that the philosopher Confucius gave. And anyway, we won't go into it. We discussed it yesterday. And
didn't he create the Tao Te Ching?
The way to prophesize things.
It's like a religion. Tao Te Ching.
What is it?
The Tao.
Tao. They're all sort of related. No, Tao is different. Taoism was started by Tao, if I'm not mistaken. Huh?
Tao.
Yeah. They're all sort of, the reason the Chinese emperors accepted these moral code type of religions is because they all preach that you have to be subordinate and submissive to the king or the emperor. You see? So any philosophy that supports fidelity or faithfulness to the government is accepted by the Chinese. That's why they accept Krishna consciousness. Because Krishna consciousness is all about, respecting, King Yudhisthira and respecting the king. So that's why when they read the Bhagavatam, they found things that were positive in it. Even though it espouses a religion, but the religion espouses acceptance of the authority of the state.
But is that also the reason why communism was so popular there? Because you instead of surrendering to God, you surrender to a government, right?
Again, yeah. Anything that supports submission to the government, they accept. Right? Even if it's Krishna consciousness, they'll accept it because it teaches the people to be peaceful, not to be revolutionary, and to accept the authority of the state. Right? The Chinese are smarter than other people, in some ways, but they're mean too. But any religion that espouses revolution, they'll wipe it out right away. It's like the Falun Gong and the evangelical Christians. They wipe them out right away. They're in the process of wiping out all the evangelicals.
Why don't they like the Buddhists? Because it's a religion.
Why do they like them?
No, why don't they like them?
Why don't they like them? How do you know they don't like them?
Because they're always trying to suppress Tibet and...
Okay, well that's Tibetan Buddhism.
Yeah.
Tibetans, of course, are the descendants of Kubera, who were experts in magic, right? And they were somewhat demoniac. They're mixed, demons and devotees. So, yeah, they have that tendency of being militant. That's why the Chinese are spread. But Buddhism has been present in China for a long time, right? In fact, it spread from China to Japan. Right? I'm not a big expert on all these subjects. I'm just giving a general idea. Okay, then also we accepted why many people follow religions without God. So the ultimate religion without God is Buddhism. That's why it's so popular.
Jainism also.
Jainism is not so popular as Buddhism. Buddhism is very popular because it's religion without God. And it's all about self-improvement. You can become a bodhisattva, you can become a type of Buddha if you follow Buddha's 8 steps. And it also favors moral living, righteous living. Then there's also a religion without God is Mayavadism. Mm-hmm. Their conception of God is actually atheistic. God is not a person. So therefore it's very popular. Another religion without God is Unitarianism. Unitarianism is supposed to be Christianity, but actually in Unitarianism, I attended some of their programs. It's very interesting, Their point is you can accept any God you want. So therefore, that's like saying there's no God. You can accept any God you want means it's no God. So there was this one girl, she's a Wiccan. You know what a Wiccan is? Wiccans are witches, right? So she's a Unitarian, And why? Because you can accept any God you want, right? So their God is some kind of demon, witch, right? So Unitarianism, everyone can go to a Unitarian church. Doesn't matter what you believe. Now there's also the atheist church. They started in England and they have one in New York. I think they have one in San Francisco.
Who is this?
These are just normal people. They're atheists, so they started a church.
Yeah, I see.
Right. Their Bible is they read Wikipedia on science, Darwinism. They read these different books. That's part of their. Instead of reading Bible, they read Darwin's Origin of Species, and they have their own songs. They have their own rituals. Right.
So Baha'i is also atheistic, right?
Well, Baha'ism believes that Baha'u'llah is the final prophet. That's why the Muslims hate them.
Who is Baha'u'llah?
Baha'u'llah was a Iranian Muslim, but he claimed that he was the final prophet. He comes after Muhammad. Now, the Sunnis say Muhammad is the last prophet, and so do the Shias, right? So Therefore, the Shias have persecuted the Baha'is because they think it's a bogus sect, you know. And the Baha'i philosophy is all-inclusive. It actually has a lot of nice things about it. That's why Americans convert to Baha'ism. That's the nice things. They believe in peace. They believe in universal harmony. That's their God, is universal harmony, right? So, but they're nice people. We've had Baha'is here in our interfaith conferences before, and they really are nice people, you know. But of course, they're totally rejected by the Muslims. The Muslims persecute them in the same way they persecuted the Zoroastrians.
The Parsis.
Yeah, the Parsis, yeah. Parsis are worshippers of the sun and fire, right? And that's why Iran has always been a powerful country. Previously it was called Persia, because they're worshiping the sun and fire. These are powerful, you know, Agni and Surya. If you worship Agni and Surya, you're healthy, you're strong, and you're powerful, right? And they were always extremely powerful, and they're still powerful today, right? Even though they're not Zoroastrians anymore. Okay, so a lot of religions today don't actually believe in God, because the reason is they want a religion that supports their false ego. That's why. That they can become God somehow or other. So yesterday's topic was understanding why we are in Maya right from birth. And so before Brahma created the different species, including human beings, he was obliged to create the 5 conditions of ignorance so that people can pursue their material desires without any inhibition. And it was the desire of the people. The material world was the desire of the people. The material world exists because of the desires of the insubordinate souls who became envious of God and wanted to leave Krishna. So they need a place to go if they're going to leave. Just like if you're a refugee, you still have to go somewhere, right? You can't stay in the country that you're born in. You're getting kicked out or massacred. So you have to go somewhere. And the same way, the people who revolt against Krishna in the spiritual world, they have to go somewhere. So because of their desires to go somewhere else, so they can pretend to be little gods, the material world was created. And for them to be free to commit sinful activities, there has to be conditions of ignorance. And there's 5 conditions of ignorance that Brahma had to create. He didn't like doing it, but it was necessary for the living entities so that they can feel comfortable in their skin while they're committing sin, right? And you have to be ignorant in order to commit sins. You cannot remember your relationship with Krishna and feel comfortable committing sin. So you have to be totally ignorant to commit sinful activities. And Brahma created 5 fundamental principles of ignorance. And this is what we discussed yesterday. The first is self-deception. And what does self-deception mean? You know what it means? What? Yeah, you lied to yourself. You have to convince yourself of a lie. And what is the lie? The lie is that there's no life after death. That life in the body is the only life. And there's no soul. Right? So that is the fundamental first principle of ignorance. But as soon as you believe that, then you develop a sense of death. That death will end everything. And life is actually short, so you begin to fear death. That's the second type of ignorance. And the third type of ignorance is that because life is short, because everyone is destined to die, you develop a sense of ownership. This is mine. It's called aham mameti, I, me, and mine. I, me, mine, I, me, mine, I, me, mine, I, me, mine. Everything is mine. This is mine, this is mine, this is mine. Sense of ownership. Of course, everything belongs to Krishna, but developed people, they're totally ignorant. They develop this sense that I belong, I own this. And then, once you have this sense of ownership, the sense of death and self-deception, you get anger after frustration. People get angry, their eyes puff up, their face becomes red, they breathe heavily, and, they do crazy things. Become angry after frustration. Frustrated in what? Frustrated in sense gratification, right? And that's the fourth type of ignorance. And when a person becomes angry, they do crazy things. So we're going to discuss in depth now this anger. And then the fifth thing is the illusory bodily conception of life. Conception of life, worldview of life. What is that worldview?
That we're our bodies.
No, that's the first deception. That we are the bodies. But there's a worldview now that develops from it. The worldview is, I am the body. Everything that comes from my body, like family, children, relatives, cousins, aunties, uncles, grandfathers, grandmothers, ancestors, they're mine. It's the extension of the body, right? And then it keeps going. Ethnicity, nationality, community, and it extends to the universe, right? Extends to the universe. This idea of the extension of the body, right? And then related to this conception of the body is purpose of life is sense gratification. Forget about self-realization. That's nonsense. I already know who I am. I am this body. But my body has been extended, through semen and ovums to include, aunties, uncles. Just like one time, Prabhupada was staying in one man's house in South India, and the man brings in his wife and his kids and said, Prabhupada, this is my wife, this is my first son, this is my second son, this is my first son's, and then he brings other people in, this is my first son's wife, this is my second son's wife, this is my first daughter's husband, this is my second daughter's husband. Then more people come in, this is my first son's and his wife's first daughter, and then there's a second daughter and first son, and then he goes through all that, Then more people come in. And the next time he goes out, Prabhupada whispers to the devotee, says, this is my sex life. It's all the man's sex life, right? Prabhupada is really funny, very, very funny. Very, very good sense of humor. So that's what this illusory bodily conception of life, and along with it is the goal of my life is sense gratification, and I also have to guarantee sense gratification for my sons, for their children,
Generations.
for my community, and then you become a politician, you guarantee sense gratification for your people, for your nation, and then all the wars in the world are wars of sense gratification. The Israelis want Israeli sense gratification. Palestinians want Palestinian sense gratification. Therefore, they're fighting with each other to dominate a particular part of land for their sense gratification. You see, all the wars are about sense gratification. So that's the illusory bodily conception of life. Now, why did Brahma create these 5 conditions of ignorance in the material world? Because unless a living entity forgets his real identity as the eternal servant of Krishna, it's impossible for him to live in the material conditions. It's an incompatible situation for a devotee, right? So a devotee cannot tolerate these conditions of ignorance. It's intolerable. And our existence in this material world is actually incompatible. Right? So in order to say, no, this is the normal, you have to have these 5 types of ignorance. You cannot live here otherwise. And think everything is rosy, pinky, mushy, mushy good. So
the conditioned soul voluntarily accepts those 5 kind of ignorance initially because he revolted?
no, because he revolted, he needs a place to live. So therefore, he creates material. But in order to feel comfortable in the material world, he has to have these 5 kinds of ignorance. A devotee can't feel comfortable in the material world. Therefore, he does everything to help other people. First of all, get himself out and get other people out. Because he knows this is not where we belong. It's an incompatible situation. It's all the dumbbells, the dummies, the ignoramuses, the imbeciles, the crazy people that try to make a permanent situation here. And part of that permanent situation, they try to live eternally in the material body. So they're trying to find ways to make the material body immortal. Is it possible to make the material body immortal? No. That's a crazy endeavor. But yet they're trying. They're using nanotechnology. They're using robots. They're using downloading your brain into the robot. They're using, freezing you and then unfreezing you in the future so they can heal your sickness. Oh, nonsense stuff. As soon as they freeze you, you're dead anyway. You see how crazy people have become? You have to be ignorant to even attempt such things. Unless we understand these 5 types of ignorance, we're ignorant. And we adjust to the material world, to suffering. We think it's the normal to suffer. Now what are they doing? They build entire cities and land that's below sea level. Then the whole thing gets flooded. And what do? They rebuild it again in the same place. That's ignorance. When the French settlers came to Louisiana, and they started the New Orleans. There's a city in France called Orleans, or Orleans, right? So they came to America, and they started Nouvelle Orleans, the New Orleans, right? That's why they speak Cajun. Cajun is a language that's spoken there. That's a mix of French and English. It's called Pidgin English or Cajun, right? And now they have the Cajun Navy. You know what the Cajun Navy is? Those were the people who took their boats out in Hurricane Irma and saved people that were on the tops. The United States government was not able to do it. It was the Cajun Army, the Cajun Navy that went out and saved people who were stranded in their houses. Right?
They're French?
They're descendants of the first French people that came there. Of course, they've intermarried, but they still speak some Cajun. The Cajun is a mix of French and English. Nobody understands it. The Frenchmen, when they hear this, you can't understand the damn thing they're saying. And that same type of language is spoken in the Caribbean also. In certain islands in the Caribbean that were colonized by the French.
Creole?
Creole, that's another one. Yeah, that's what they call it on the Caribbean islands, Creole. Okay, so now he created these material conditions so that people would feel free to engage in sins. Otherwise, they wouldn't feel comfortable doing it, if they're conscious of Krishna. Therefore, it's necessary to forget Krishna to live in the material conditions of life. What are the material conditions of life? Birth, death, old age, and disease, all miserable stuff. In order to accept it as the normal, you have to be ignorant. And while you're ignorant, you don't do anything to solve that problem. You just go along with it. Go with the flow.
That's a bad situation.
Yeah. So after Brahma created these 5 principles or conditions of ignorance, he felt bad. He was not satisfied. But he had to do it because the conditioned souls wanted it. Just like conditioned souls, they want Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade was the law that made abortion legal. So they're militating. Abortion for women, abortion, the government stay out of my body, blah, 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 blah. It made all this big noise about making abortion legal, right? Just like they make big noise about homosexual marriage and a big noise about, all this nonsense, right? So the conditioned souls wanted ignorance so that they would feel free. So they wanted the law of abortion so that they don't feel guilty about killing their own child.
Because approved by the state.
Approved by the state. How did they do it? They got the politicians and the scientists together to make fake science and phony theories.
Because there is no separation of science and state. You want separation of the religion and state.
Yeah, well, science is the new religion. So science said that the fetus is not conscious till the 7th or 8th month of pregnancy. So if you kill it before that, it's not really a person. And after that, you can kill it also if the mother thinks it's detrimental for her health. And she can go to any doctor and easily get a doctor's statement that is detrimental for her health. You just go, they'll write it up for you, pay them $50. You can kill your baby. And then the politicians made it definitions that a child is not protected by the Constitution of the United States until it's out of the womb. Therefore you can kill it while it's still in the womb. So now there was a lady just had a baby in the McDonald's, and she tried to flush it down the toilet right away. Right? She will be prosecuted for murder. If the baby died, she'll be prosecuted because it was out of the womb. But she could go get an abortion, a final, what do you call it? Final stage abortion, meaning right before the baby is born, where the doctor sticks something into her and cuts off the neck of the baby. Right? Then that's not murder. That's a legal abortion, even in the final stage, because she got that letter for $50 that it's detrimental for her health. Although it's not detrimental for her health, but it's all phony business. It's mass murder. They kill 2 million children a year in the United States. 2 million children are aborted in the United States. Okay, so this is all ignorance. And then the other question goes, if we were all originally with Krishna, then why did we leave Krishna? And why didn't Krishna let us leave him and come to the material world? That's another question. All these questions came up yesterday, and the kids were asking the questions. Of course, there's no kids today except for Kushi. So we answered that question also. So in order to suffer repeatedly in the material world, we have to be in ignorance. So Brahma created these 5 conditions of ignorance, but he didn't feel good. So what did he do? Well, he established 4 principles of knowledge to counteract the 5 principles of ignorance. And they are Sankhya Yoga, that was originally spoken by Kapila Muni, then Yoga, Mystic Yoga, and then Vairagya, and Tapas. These 4 types of knowledge were established by Brahma to overcome the 5 types of ignorance of the living entity. The problem is that in modern times, in Kali Yuga, all these things have been misrepresented by rascals. But we'll discuss the original proponents of these things. So, original proponent of Sankhya Yoga is Kapila Muni, an incarnation of Krishna, the son of Kardama Muni and Devahuti. And it's explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. And an example of Vairagya means accepting renunciation, is King Rishabhadev. He was king of the whole world, the whole universe. Prabhu, you come 8:30, what are you going to hear? Either you come on time or don't come, because you're not going to hear anything. Okay, so it's just I have a responsibility waking up early in the morning. If you're going to bring your child to the class, you have a responsibility to go to sleep early, wake up early, be here on time. Does it make sense? Okay. Okay, so the Vairagya, King Rishabhadev had a huge kingdom. And he had beautiful wives. I think he had wives and children. He had 100 sons. Right? Gave it all up and engaged in avadut yoga. Avadut yoga is you make no attempt at self-defense. So if people would urine on him, they would defecate on him, they would spit on him, they would beat him. Never complained. He would never ask for anything. If someone brought him food that was acceptable, he would eat it. But if they didn't give him anything, he would fast. He was totally an avadut. Right?
The son did the same thing in the second birth.
Bharat?
Yeah, third birth.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. So, and then you have, that's Vairagya, and then second was yoga. Okay, yoga, you have Dhruva Maharaj. Dhruva Maharaj did severe yoga for 6 months that was advised to him by Narada Muni. The first month, he only ate leaves and grass and a little bit of water. The second month, he gave up the leaves and grass. He just took, and he was eating them. He gave up the leaves and grass, only took water. And the first month, he was only taking every 3 days. Right? Now he gives up leaves and grass completely. It just takes a little bit of water. And then the fourth month, he gives up the water, and so forth. Until by the 6th month, he's not eating, he's not drinking anything, and he's not breathing. He gave up breathing also. Right, so it's a severe type of yoga, but at the end of 6 months, Lord Vishnu appeared before him. So we'll continue, we'll stop because there's a program today. But we discussed all these things yesterday. I didn't even get a chance to discuss what I was going to discuss today. If you want to hear the rest, come to